I'll tell you something most people don't want to hear, and I'll tell you right away so you don't waste a second. You are living at 40% of your potential, not 50, not 80, 40. And I learned that the hard way long before I ever wore a SEAL trident on my chest. The moment most people feel discomfort, just a hint of pressure, a moment of doubt, they shut down, they quit, they walk away from the very thing that could have changed their life. And the worst part, they don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're being smart, protecting their energy, or not pushing too fast. But what they're really doing is sabotaging their future before it even begins. I've watched people throw away opportunities, relationships, fitness, businesses, dreams, all because their mind whispered one small lie: I'm done. I saw it every single day in Bud's training. Guys who could have been phenomenal operators, stronger than me, faster than me, smarter than me, collapsed mentally long before their body ever reached failure. They weren't weak people, they were normal people. And normal people are trained from childhood to avoid discomfort. But discomfort is where transformation lives. When I tell you the 40% rule changed my life, I'm not giving you motivation. I'm giving you a weapon. When I hit that point, cold shaking through my bones, lungs burning, body screaming to stop, one instructor looked at me and said, "You're only at 40%." At the time, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was one of those inspirational lines they feed you to keep you moving. But then I pushed a few more steps, a few more seconds, a few more breaths, and suddenly I discovered something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. My body was fine. It was my mind that wanted out. According to research on Navy SEAL candidates at the University of Pennsylvania, the human mind triggers the stop reflex long before the body is anywhere near real danger. Your brain is a survival machine, not a performance machine. It wants to keep you safe, not make you extraordinary. And that means the second things get uncomfortable, your brain lies to you. It tells you you've reached your limit. It tells you to back off. It tells you to quit, even when there's still 60% of power left unused inside you. But here's the part most people get wrong. They think pushing past that point means going full beast mode, burning themselves out, or grinding until they collapse. They think the 40% rule is about brute force. It's not. And that misconception keeps millions of people from ever experiencing what they're truly capable of. The secret isn't in pushing harder. The secret is in pushing slightly longer, just a moment longer, a micro overcome, a single breath, a single step, a single rep more than your mind wants. I call these micro overrides. These are the small moments where your brain screams, "Stop," and you whisper back, "Not yet." You don't negotiate, you don't reason, you just override the system. And the crazy thing, every time you override that instinct, even by one tiny action, you rewire your brain. You teach it that discomfort isn't danger. You teach it that you are stronger than the impulse to quit. You teach it that you have more inside you than you've ever accessed. And the more often you do this, the more you build an identity that doesn't fold under pressure. When I first applied this, I was still that scared, cold kid standing on the shoreline, waves crashing, instructors screaming, doubt louder than both. I didn't transform through big moments. I transformed through micro overrides, choosing to stay in the water 10 seconds longer, choosing to run one more meter, choosing to breathe through the panic instead of giving in. You don't need talent to do this. You don't need motivation. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to take one more step when your mind tells you you're done. That's the moment your life begins to change. That's the moment you stop living at 40%. That's the moment you start seeing who you really are. And I promise you this: once you learn to override that first lie your mind tells you, everything in your life changes because you'll finally understand the truth. You've got more. Your mind is not designed to make you powerful. It's designed to keep you alive. That's the first thing I need you to understand. And the second you understand it, your entire life starts to make sense. Every time you've quit early, every time you've backed away from discomfort, every time you've doubted yourself or waited for the right moment, it wasn't weakness, it was wiring. Your brain's oldest job is survival, and survival is built on caution. It wants to keep you safe, not strong, protected, not growing, comfortable, not capable. And that means your own mind lies to you about your limits every single day. When I was training to become a SEAL, I saw this lie play out over and over again. Guys who were physically beasts, bigger than me, faster than me, with better genetics, better athletic backgrounds, would hit that first wall of exhaustion and their mind would tell them they were done. I watched men who could deadlift twice my body weight ring the bell because their brain convinced them they had reached the limit. But their bodies were still fine. Their muscles weren't failing. Their lungs weren't failing. Their spirit was failing because their mind convinced them they didn't have anything left. Researchers from Stanford discovered your quit reflex activates long before your body is actually stressed. Think about that for a second. Your brain tells you to stop, not because you're in danger, but because you're stepping outside your comfort zone. Your mind reacts to discomfort the same way it reacts to threat, fight, flight, or freeze. And most people choose freeze. They hesitate, they wait, they pull back, and that hesitation becomes a lifestyle. They never start the business. They never fix their health. They never change their habits. They never push the weight. They never make the call, all because they're waiting to feel ready. Let me tell you the truth. Readiness is a trap. I've never felt ready for a single important moment in my life. Not for Hell Week, not for deployment, not for the first time I had to lead men into a situation where lives were on the line. I didn't feel calm. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel prepared, but I acted anyway. And that's the difference between who you are right now and who you know you could become. People stay stuck because they wait for readiness, and readiness never comes. But here's the hope. The brain adapts shockingly fast. Neuroscientists have shown that the moment you push slightly beyond your comfort zone, even just by a fraction, your brain rewires itself. It learns that discomfort doesn't equal danger. It learns that effort is safe. It learns that you can do more than you think. When I realized that, everything changed. I stopped trying to feel ready and started trying to feel the edge. That edge is where your life expands. There's a technique I used in combat that I still use today whenever my mind tries to lie to me. It's simple, and it saved my life more than once. When panic hits, when doubt creeps in, when the mind starts screaming, stop. I give myself 10 seconds. 10 seconds where I override the noise. 10 seconds where I refuse to negotiate. 10 seconds where I focus on nothing but the next breath, the next movement, the next decision. You'd be shocked how much control you reclaim in 10 focused seconds. Fear loses its grip. The chaos quiets. Your mind remembers who's actually in charge. I used this technique during firefights when everything was exploding around us. I used it during surveillance operations when the adrenaline made my hands shake. I used it in freezing water during Bud S when it felt like my bones were turning to ice. And I still use it today when I'm facing something difficult in my personal life. 10 seconds of override is enough to shut down the survival instinct and activate the part of your brain built for discipline, strategy, and clarity. If you learn nothing else from me, learn this. Your mind lies to you, but you don't have to listen. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to wait for motivation. You don't need to eliminate fear. You just need 10 seconds of control, 10 seconds of choosing action over hesitation, 10 seconds where you prove to your mind that you are stronger than the reflex to quit. Once you experience that shift, even once, you'll understand something life-changing. You've never even come close to meeting your real potential. And the next time your brain tries to lie to you, you'll have the power to answer back. There was a night in Buds that I still feel in my bones. The Pacific was black, angry, and cold enough to make you forget your own name. We had been awake for more than 2 days, drifting in and out of hallucinations, our bodies shaking uncontrollably from the cold. That kind of cold isn't discomfort, it's a presence. It crawls into your joints, your teeth, your spine. It becomes a voice whispering, quit, quit, quit. And in that moment, quitting feels like the most logical decision you could ever make. We stood in the surf zone, waves crashing over our heads, instructors pacing the shoreline like sharks. Every time a wave hit, candidates disappeared under the water, coming up gasping, confused, barely able to see straight. I watched men, strong, tough, athletic men, break down not because their bodies were failing, but because their minds collapsed under the weight of exhaustion and cold. They weren't weak, they were human. There's a point when your body feels like it's shutting down and your mind tells you there's no way out except the bell. That metallic bell sits there on the beach, ringing through the night whenever someone gives up. And that sound during Hell Week becomes a kind of music, a lullaby for the part of you that wants escape. I felt that temptation rising inside me. My legs were numb. My hands wouldn't form a fist. My jaw chattered so violently I bit through my own lip. Tiny spots of blood floated in the water like little red fireflies. Every instinct I had said, "You're done. You can't take another second of this." And that's when the fear hit. Not fear of the cold, but fear of becoming the guy who walks out of the water. Fear of being the man who had potential, but not enough fight. This is where the 40% rule saved me. I remembered what an instructor said earlier that week. When you think you're done, you're at 40%. At the time, 40%, I thought it was motivational nonsense. But standing there in that freezing surf, listening to the bell, watching men stumble out, I realized something. I wasn't collapsing. I wasn't injured. I was just overwhelmed. That meant I had more in me. Maybe not a lot, maybe just a sliver, but more. So instead of thinking about surviving the entire night or the entire evolution or even the next hour, I did something different. I focused on the next meter, literally 1 meter. I told myself, just get through the next small wave. Just stay here until the instructors walk 10 steps down the beach. Just hold on until the next command. Military psychologists studying SEAL trainees found that micro goal framing increases endurance by over 60%. And in that moment, I understood why. When the world shrinks to something you can control, your fear loses its oxygen. The mistake most people make is thinking discipline comes from motivation. They think warriors wake up inspired every day, that we love suffering, that we enjoy pushing ourselves. Let me tell you the truth. On that night, in that water, I wasn't motivated. I wasn't inspired. I wasn't tough. I was cold, exhausted, scared, and one thought away from quitting. Discipline has nothing to do with motivation. Discipline is what's left when motivation dies. That night, I didn't conquer the ocean. I didn't conquer Hell Week. I didn't conquer the mission. I conquered 1 meter at a time, one breath at a time, one choice at a time. That's the secret no one wants to hear. You don't need to be strong enough for the whole journey. You just need to be strong enough for the next tiny piece of it. And once I realized that, something inside me shifted. The cold didn't go away. The exhaustion didn't lighten. But my mind quieted. The noise faded. And I realized I could endure just a little more. And that little more carried me through the night. And then the next one. And then the next. That was the moment everything changed for me. Not because I became stronger, but because I finally understood how strength actually works. Not in leaps, not in motivation, not in giant heroic moments, but in meters, one at a time. Most people think quitting is something dramatic. They imagine someone walking out of a job, ending a relationship, or slamming a locker shut in the gym. But quitting rarely looks like that. Quitting usually happens quietly, internally, long before the world ever sees it. I've watched civilians quit on themselves in thousands of small ways, ways they don't even recognize as quitting. They stop pushing the moment something feels uncomfortable. They step back when a challenge demands more than expected. They hesitate when life asks them to stretch, and every hesitation becomes a pattern. Every pattern becomes a habit, and every habit becomes an identity. I see it in the workplace all the time. Someone gets handed a tough project, and instead of leaning in, they shrink back. They tell themselves, I'll start tomorrow. I need more time. I need to feel ready. They don't realize they're quitting, but they are. At the gym, someone feels the burn in their legs and immediately drops the intensity. In relationships, people avoid difficult conversations and call it keeping the peace, when really they're avoiding discomfort. They're quitting in real time, not because they lack capability, but because they've never tested where their real limits actually are. The truth is, most civilians operate far below their true capacity. They don't get anywhere near 40%, let alone beyond it. And it's not because they're weak, it's because life doesn't demand it. Life doesn't put you in freezing water or force you to run on no sleep or push you until your muscles scream. In the military, you discover what you're capable of because you have no choice. In civilian life, you have endless choices, and those choices allow people to escape discomfort before they ever reach the point where real growth begins. But here's the part that gives me hope. The 40% rule isn't just for special forces, it applies to everyone. Entrepreneurs building something from nothing, parents juggling kids and careers, retirees trying to stay active, students overwhelmed by pressure. You don't need to be in combat to feel the weight of responsibility or fear of failure. Pressure is pressure, no matter where it shows up. And when you hit that moment where you feel like you can't push, can't continue, can't handle more, that's when the 40% rule transforms you. Because if you push just a bit past that internal wall, even for a moment, you level up. The mistake most people make is negotiating with themselves. It's one of the most destructive habits you can develop. They wake up and think, do I feel like working out? They ask, should I push this project now or later? They say, maybe I'll have that hard conversation next week when I have more energy. Every time you negotiate with yourself, you create a mental escape hatch, an exit, a way out. And humans always choose the path of least resistance when an escape exists. In the teams, I learned something that changed everything for me. The mind is strongest before it has time to think. Thought is where fear grows, doubt grows, excuses grow. So I created what I now teach civilians, the no negotiation window. It's simple. You get 90 seconds to act, not think, not plan, not debate, act. If you feel the urge to do something hard, get up, start working, begin the run, make the call. You move within 90 seconds. No negotiation, no conversation, no deal making with your comfort zone. A Harvard Business Review summary on high performers shows those who act immediately outperform procrastinators by 48%. And the reason is simple. Action kills doubt. When you act before the mind has time to overthink, you bypass the entire internal dialogue that normally stops you. In Budess, I learned that if I hesitated for even a few seconds, I'd talk myself out of everything. The cold water would feel colder, the weight would feel heavier, the fear would feel louder, so I stopped hesitating. I acted first, processed later. Now I teach the same principle to entrepreneurs who sit staring at their laptops, to parents who tell themselves they'll fix their health someday, to retirees who want to reinvent themselves but feel stuck, to students drowning under pressure who think they need to feel confident before starting. You don't need confidence. You don't need readiness. You need a simple rule. When you feel the pull to act, you've got 90 seconds, move. When you stop negotiating with yourself, you stop quitting in small ways. And when you stop quitting in small ways, you stop quitting in big ones. The day you remove your mental escape hatch is the day you meet the version of yourself that's been hiding behind hesitation your entire life. Every time you stop early, you teach your brain the wrong lesson. People don't realize this. They think quitting is an isolated moment, a one-time decision, but your brain is always watching you. Every time you stop when things get uncomfortable, every time you back down when something feels difficult, every time you tell yourself, I'll do it tomorrow, your brain records that pattern. And the next time you face discomfort, your mind remembers the easier path. It whispers, we quit last time, remember? Let's quit again. That's how weakness is built, not in dramatic failures, but in quiet moments of surrender that stack up over years. I've seen this in civilians just as much as I saw it in young SEAL candidates. People who think they lack discipline don't actually lack discipline. They've just trained themselves to stop early so many times that stopping has become familiar. It's not a moral flaw, it's conditioning. The more you quit, the more natural quitting feels. The more you push, even in tiny increments, the more natural strength feels. And here's where the hope comes in. The brain can be rewired. In fact, it rewires faster than people expect. You don't need huge wins. You don't need life-changing achievements. You don't need to transform overnight. Every tiny push past discomfort, every time you do 1 second more, 1 step more, 1 rep more, creates a microscopic shift in your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who backs down. You start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. And identity is far more powerful than motivation. According to Japanese performance researchers, identity-based habits outperform willpower-driven habits long-term. That means when you act in a way that aligns with the identity you want, not the results you want, but the identity, you change the kind of person your brain believes you are. And once your brain believes you're the kind of person who finishes what they start, everything becomes easier. Discipline stops being a battle. It starts being your default. The mistake most people make is they track results instead of tracking promises to themselves. They measure progress in lost pounds, completed projects, revenue, followers, milestones. Those things matter, sure, but the problem is they take time. They fluctuate. They can stall or regress. When people only track results, they quit when progress slows. They think they failed, when the truth is their identity was still rebuilding. What they should track is whether they kept their promise today. Did you show up? Did you stick to the plan? Did you push just a little past your comfort? Did you keep the promise you made to the person you're trying to become? That's the real scoreboard. When you measure that instead of the result, you stay consistent even when the numbers don't immediately reward you. During my time in the teams and for years after, I developed something I now teach civilians because it's simple, safe, and incredibly powerful. I call it the one more rep protocol. And it's exactly what it sounds like. No matter what task you're doing, working out, studying, writing, cleaning, training, anything, you add one more rep when your mind tells you you're done. Not 10 more, not an hour more, one. That single rep does something important. It tells your brain that you, not your fear, not your fatigue, not your excuses, are in charge. It's small enough that you don't burn out, but meaningful enough that your identity changes every time you do it. When you stack those small wins day after day, your brain starts to adopt a new identity. I finish things. I push further. I don't quit early. This protocol saved me countless times in training. When I thought I had nothing left, I'd squeeze out one more push-up, one more stroke in the water, one more minute awake. And every single time, that one more rep proved that my limit wasn't real, it was mental. And when you learn that lesson enough times, discipline stops feeling like a fight. It becomes who you are. The truth is, nobody becomes disciplined by accident. You rebuild your identity one micro action at a time. You teach your brain what to believe about you. You show it what you tolerate and what you don't. And if you want to become unbreakable, unstoppable, deeply consistent, then make this the rule of your life. When you think you're done, you're not. Do one more. That's how warriors are built. That's how confidence is forged. That's how identity is rewritten from the inside out. There's a truth I wish more people understood. The greatest tragedy in life isn't failure. Failure is feedback. Failure is friction. Failure is part of the mission. The real tragedy is something far quieter, far more painful, and far more common. It's going your entire life without ever discovering who you could have become. Most people never meet the strongest version of themselves. They never push far enough, long enough, consistently enough to break through the false ceiling their mind built for them. They live and die inside a limit that was never real in the first place. And I've learned that this regret doesn't show up at age 20, it shows up later when people look back on decades of potential they never accessed. That's what I fear for people, not failure, missed greatness. But here's the part that should give you hope. Your life doesn't need to flip upside down to change dramatically. You don't need a year. You don't need a grand plan. You don't need a perfect routine or a life-changing event or some lightning bolt moment. 1 week of applying the 40% rule, just 7 days of pushing slightly past your comfort can transform how you see yourself. When you push past the point where your mind says stop, even by a tiny amount, something shifts inside you. You start walking differently. You speak with more certainty. Your energy rises. Your discipline strengthens. Your confidence grows, not because the world changed, but because you did. People don't realize how fast the brain updates its identity when you give it evidence. 7 days is enough to start a new loop, enough to wake up energy you haven't felt in years, enough to make you feel capable again. When someone tells me they feel stuck or lost or tired of their own patterns, I don't tell them to reinvent their life. I tell them to give me 1 week of pushing past the point where they normally stop. 1 week of choosing the harder thing by 1 inch, 1 rep, 1 moment. 1 week of doing what most people avoid, confronting their false limits. The problem is that most people try to flip their entire life overnight. They say, this is it. I'm changing everything. They rewrite their routines, their diet, their goals, their habits all at once. And for 2 days, they feel unstoppable. Then day 3 hits, and their brain collapses under the weight of unrealistic expectations. They fall back to old patterns and think they failed, but they didn't fail. They overloaded. You don't build strength by lifting the heaviest weight first. You build it by stacking small wins, tiny victories, slight improvements. That's how discipline becomes permanent, not through a massive overhaul, but through consistency built 1 moment at a time. That's why I give people one final tool, a tool we used in the teams and one I still use to this day. I call it the SEAL debrief ritual. Every night before you shut down, before your mind wanders, you ask yourself 3 questions. These questions are simple, but they cut straight to the core of who you're becoming. They keep you honest. They keep you sharp. They keep you aligned with the person you're trying to be. And over time, they turn discipline from something you fight for into something you live from. You live. The questions are, what did I do well today? Where did I hesitate or hold back? And what is one thing I will do better tomorrow? Psychologists analyzing elite soldiers found that reflection rituals doubled long-term consistency. That doesn't surprise me. When you shine a light on your behavior every day, you stop drifting. You stop lying to yourself. You stop making excuses. You start improving, not in leaps, but in steady steps. The SEAL debrief ritual creates a feedback loop, a discipline loop. It rewires your identity one night at a time. If you do this ritual for 7 days, just 7, you will feel the shift. You'll start to recognize where you quit early. You'll start to see where you could have pushed 1 second more. You'll notice the places where fear whispered and you listened. And once you see it, you can change it. Once you track your promises instead of your results, discipline stabilizes, confidence compounds, a new identity starts forming, one built on truth instead of instinct. And when that identity takes hold, your life starts to move. You start to move, not because you became a different person, but because you finally stopped living at 40%. So I'll leave you with this. You think you're done, you're not even close. You've got more.